This is the first video in a series looking at the main roundabouts that might come up if you take your practical test from Poole Driving Test Centre. Here we are looking at Darbys Corner roundabout on the edge of Canford Heath and Broadstone. It's essentially a pretty straightforward roundabout, but it is quite large and busy, and there are a few little points to keep an eye on. It's also a roundabout that can come up pretty frequently on tests, as it is close to the test centre on some of the main roads to and from it, so it's important to be comfortable with dealing with it from all directions. If you're not yet feeling completely confident with understanding how you choose which lane to be in and what to signal dealing with roundabouts, it's worth looking back over our video tutorial that looks at these issues. There's a link in the description below so you can take a look. Let's look at approaching from Canford Heath from the east first. It's worth mentioning that there's a small service road just as you enter the roundabout that's marked as a dead-end exit on the signs as you approach. This exit is generally ignored for the purposes of directions, so we call the A349 towards Poole the first exit, the B3074 towards Broadstone the second exit, etc. If you happen to be following a sat-nav at this point, it will usually count the service road and the examiner will correct the instruction. So the sat-nav might say, cross the roundabout, third exit, and the examiner would correct this to cross the roundabout, second exit. We do this because experience shows that learners rarely see the first little exit on the roundabout, so would end up taking the exit towards Wimborne, as this is the third exit they say. If you are taking the first exit on the left towards Poole, or the second exit ahead towards Broadstone, you would use the left-hand lane on approach, as you would expect. If you are turning right to the third exit towards Wimborne, you need to be especially aware of what's happening on your left-hand side. The natural route around the roundabout to this exit is shown as a dashed line. This can cause problems, however, for inexperienced drivers, because they tend to be a little slower around the roundabout than other vehicles, and this can mean that cars can either move across and get alongside from behind you, or join from the Poole exit on the left and move alongside you from there. So it's worth being quite defensive in your driving here. If you check your mirrors, signal and move across as the hatchings start to develop to create the second exit, as shown by the solid line, you prevent any cars getting alongside you and blocking your exit route. Approaching from the south entrance, we have 3 lanes available. Taking the first exit on the left is straightforward. Just pick up the left-hand lane as it forms and keep left on the roundabout. It's worth mentioning that both of the other 2 lanes are marked with a straight arrow as you approach. This doesn't mean that both lanes are appropriate to follow the road ahead second exit. For this you would take the middle lane. Marking both lanes with a straight-on arrow is a convention that is sometimes used at roundabouts and essentially means pick the best lane for any exit not yet specifically marked. In this case we would use the middle lane for the second exit and the right lane for the third exit. As with the previous entrance, if you are turning right, it is worth making sure you move over as early as possible to prevent other drivers from getting alongside you. If you are approaching the roundabout from the Broadstone direction, you just apply the normal rules. Use the left-hand lane to turn left first exit to Wimborne, or to go ahead second exit towards Canford Heath. If you are turning right, use the right-hand lane on approach. There are a couple of points to be careful of though. I've found that quite often when asked to go ahead second exit, the hatching on the roundabout used to create the first exit can disorientate and drivers feel that they have to stay left of the hatching and therefore end up taking the first exit. This isn't a great problem on a driving test, as you are allowed to go the wrong way as long as it is safe and legal to do so. The route you should take though is following the silver and blue cars shown, as they have entered the roundabout from the left-hand lane ahead of the camera vehicle to go ahead to the second exit. If you are turning right to the third exit, you can see that this exit is a 2-lane dual carriageway. Normally you would want to exit into the left-hand lane on the dual carriageway, as we are always looking to keep left unless there is a good reason to do otherwise. If a car gets alongside you here, or enters from the left as you approach, it is perfectly acceptable to exit into the right-hand lane of the dual carriageway, and then, once it is safe, to move across to the left-hand side. You can see how the solid line to exit into the left-hand lane shows how you can move across as soon as the second exit is leaving to prevent vehicles getting alongside you. If you wait until you have gone past the entrance from Canford Heath before coming across to exit into the left-hand lane, you are significantly increasing the likelihood of conflict with cars on your left. And if you find yourself in this position, you are better off exiting into the right-hand lane shown by the dashed line and then looking to move across once off the roundabout. Lastly, approaching the roundabout from the north, from Wimborne direction, You would again follow the normal rules. Use the left-hand lane as you approach to turn left first exit, or to go ahead second exit. And use the right-hand lane to turn right to the third exit towards Broadstone. If you are taking the second exit onto the dual carriageway, because you have entered the roundabout in the left-hand lane, you should only exit into the left-hand lane on the dual carriageway, as any other drivers approaching from behind in the right-hand lane will be expecting to be able to exit alongside you. You could also use the right-hand lane as you approach to go ahead to the second exit, as there are 2 lanes on the exit, but I would advise keeping it simple while learning and sticking to the left-hand lane to go ahead. If you are taking the third exit, you can see that the hatching creating a lane for the exit extends out a long way onto the roundabout. The best way to deal with this is to be able to come across early as you pass the entrance from the dual carriageway, as this puts you the correct side of the hatching and is a nice defensive position, stopping other drivers getting alongside the car on the left and preventing you from exiting. If you want to walk through the roundabout a few times on Google Street View to get a feel for how it looks from the driver's point of view, I've included a Google Maps link in the video description.